Do you remember Bach's Air on a G string? Originally this was written for a string quintet, but in actual fact there are lots of transcriptions of it available for solo piano too. Today I'd like to talk you through how I approach learning Siloti's transcription of this lovely little piece. Are you sitting comfortably? Then let's begin. This is Tommy with Tommy's Piano Corner, the place for returning pianists, or indeed anybody who loves the piano, to share tips and ideas about how to get the most from this great hobby. Bach's Air on a G string in fact brings back childhood memories for me. For those of you born in the UK, I'm sure you'll remember a set of very famous cigar adverts from the 70s, I guess, 70s, maybe the 80s. What happened in these adverts, as you'll remember, was no matter what went wrong for the star of the advert, at the end there was always happiness in a cigar. And the Air on a G string arranged by Jacques Lussier started to play as the match was struck to light the cigar to help the guy get over whatever misfortune had befallen him during the advert. In its original form, as I said, it was written for a string quintet. So, to make the best of it, I thought I'd try and find a good transcription of it. At the moment, whenever I think about piano transcriptions, I've looked for things that have been transcribed by a gentleman called Siloti. I first came across a transcription he did of Saint-Saëns the Swan that was in Pianist magazine some time ago, and I found that it was a great transcription, and he takes an approach of trying to not add or remove anything from the music as he transcribes it. He'll only really modify it if, for whatever reason, something like the sustaining power of the piano means that you need to repeat a note rather than hold it through as you could do on a violin. But otherwise, he follows as closely as is possible to do exactly the original orchestral score. I actually did a recording of myself playing his transcription of The Swan, which you can find on my Facebook page, Tommy's Piano Corner, if you'd like to hear it. Anyway, back to the original video. When I was starting to think about a transcription for this, I thought I'd look for one by Siloti, and I was delighted to find that one is there. I was able to download Siloti's transcription of this piece from IMSLP. That means I can keep it on my iPad and store it in my 4Score app that I've done a video about before and linked below for you. The structure of the piece, in fact, is actually quite simple. There are just two parts, each of which is repeated almost note for note, apart from maybe the last bar of each one. You'll find the first section is just 6 bars long, excluding the repeat, and then the second section is 12 bars long, excluding the repeat. When I first started practicing it, I did what I always do with any piece, and that's really to focus on bringing out the melody line to make sure that that sings above the rest. However, given that this is Bach, who is of course famous for counterpoint and multi-voices, and also because this was a piece originally written for a string quintet, I thought actually I should probably focus more on the other voices as well. And of course, to do this, it means you need to somehow work out what they are. So to do that, I thought my best bet would be to download the original string quintet score directly, which luckily, again, is available on IMSLP. And that then helped me work my way through. On the string score, it actually looks as though it was written for quartet, but I discovered that on the bass and cello stave, they both read the same stuff, and therefore, because the bass renders that same note 1 octave lower than the cello, you end up with 2 completely separate notes. The remaining parts are first violin, second violin, and viola. Arguably, the first violin part and the bass part aren't really that challenging to get right, in the sense that they're the top and the bottom notes that you're playing. However, when I first listened to a recording of myself practicing this, what I noticed was I couldn't actually really hear the cello part at all. And I think this is because my natural instinct when I'm playing something in octaves in my left hand is to bring out the lowest note, so the note played with my pinky, over the note that's played with my thumb. And I think that's just the normal way that you would play. However, here, because you're trying to bring out two different instruments, it is important that you give them both the same weight. I spent quite a long time playing through just these left-hand octaves, listening very intently to make sure that I could distinctly hear each of the notes, so the cello and the bass notes separated from each other. I've noticed on some of the lower notes, I don't know if it's my technique or my piano, but on some of the lower octaves, I'm still not convinced I can hear both notes independently. But in the more mid-range ones, I'm definitely managing to get the two to sing out properly. Finally, Siloti marks these as non-legato because, of course, both the bass and the cello, when they play this, pluck rather than bow. For me, then, the most significant challenge really was trying to distinguish between the second violin and the viola parts. And of course, to do this, it means somehow you have to work out which one is which. So what I did was I took the original score and then looked through that and the transcription together and just used different coloured highlighters to highlight which part was which. My initial expectation was that I should have been able to voice and identify each of these parts all the way when I was playing it. However, at least for me, and maybe it's just because my technique isn't up to par yet, I couldn't really do this. I think with the natural decay of the piano, that anything played this slowly, where you've got anything bigger than an eighth note, really you just can't connect the two together properly. You know, it's easier to do this in the melody and the bass because your brain almost subconsciously connects the dots for you. It remembers what the last note of the melody was and then it picks up the second. But where you've got pieces that you've got 4 or 5 different parts playing together, your brain's not that clever, and unless your fingers are very good and able to give your ears more to go on, then it doesn't become very easy to do. When I was first trying to fix this problem, I basically used Graham Fitch's advice of practicing strands separately. He did a video for Pianist magazine where he was talking about hand separate practice, and he also mentioned strand separate practice here. And effectively what he's saying is that you practice one or more voices together or individually rather than the entire piece. So for example, you might try to practice just the cello and viola together, omitting the bass, the first and second violins. However, there were certain parts of the piece where I really just couldn't manage to connect the second violin and the viola together properly, even using this technique. Graham also mentioned this technique in his fantastic set of eBooks about practicing piano, which again, I'll link for you below. Finally, I stumbled across the solution to this on John Mortenson's Cedarville music channel. He created an entire playlist of how to go about practicing and learning a fugue. So I decided to watch the playlist end to end to see what I could glean from what he was saying. I've linked this playlist below for you so you can check it out if you're interested. What he effectively said, if I interpreted it correctly, is that when you're playing a fugue, you need to make what he called voicing choices, which is to say you can't always bring out every independent voice all the time within the music. So you will choose which ones to favour at any point in time. This then got me to thinking that perhaps the solution to my problem would be to identify the important parts of both the second violin and the viola parts and bring those out where they're the most prominent in the arrangement. So let me show you what I mean, and we'll look at the parts of the transcription where each of these instruments is the most prominent. In the first section, the main interplay is mainly between the first and second violins that have a sort of question and answer type affair going on. This then is a nice introduction to trying to bring out two individual voices. You'll notice if you look at the score that some of the notes for the second violin are actually played by your left hand on the piano as opposed to your right. So this gives some interesting practice on passing a melody or passing a voice from one hand to the other and back again. However, the second section is a lot more challenging. Whereas here you've got also the second violin and the viola playing actively at different parts during the piece. In general, you'll find that between bars 7 and 12, it's the viola that's mainly interplaying with the first violin. The second violin then takes over this question and answer part during bars 13 and 14, and finally bars 15 to the end. This is where you've got first violin, second violin and viola all interweaving notes with each other. So this is probably the most complicated bit. Now that I've managed to separate the individual parts out like this in my mind, the strands separate technique does make a very interesting and valuable way of practicing. I found that to get the maximum benefit, it was easier just to focus on small 2-bar segments and play each of these using a variety of the different voices. So say just double bass and first violin, cello and viola, cello and second violin, bass and second violin, etc. I found this to be incredible mental gymnastics, for me at least anyway, as of course you need to make sure you maintain the same fingering that you intend to use when you put all of the voices back together. This is an absolutely beautiful piece of music to learn, and aside its popularity, I found that it really helped my playing by forcing me to think differently about the way I approach certain things that I'd not really done before. You can see my homage to the original set of cigar adverts on my Facebook page. Basically, I did a recording of myself playing the Air on a G-string on piano. I downloaded a lot of the original advertising footage from YouTube and stitched some of this together with the videos of my playing and posted it on my Facebook page. It's a bit of fun. If you're not already, then do remember to subscribe to Tommy's Piano Corner. Click that little bell icon so that you're notified of all new videos as and when they're released. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next week.